House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. Chapter 4. Faith, sir, as to that matter, I don't believe one half of it myself. Diedrich Knickerbocker. In early June of 1990, the Navidsons flew to Seattle for a wedding. When they returned, something in the house had changed. It was not, however, obvious, like for instance a fire, a robbery, or an act of vandalism. Quite the contrary, the horror was atypical. No one could deny that there had been an intrusion, but it was so odd no one knew how to respond. On video, we see Navidson acting almost amused, while Karen simply draws both hands to her face as if she were about to pray. Their children, Chad and Daisy, just run through it, playing, giggling, completely oblivious to the deeper implications. What took place amounts to a strange spatial violation which has already been described in a number of ways, namely surprising, unsettling, disturbing, but most of all, uncanny. In German, the word for uncanny is Unheimlich, which Heidegger in his book Sein und Zeit thought worthy of some consideration. In anxiety, one feels uncanny. Here, the peculiar unindefiniteness of that which Dyson finds itself alongside in anxiety comes proximally to expression, the nothing and nowhere. But here, uncanniness also means not being at home. Das Nichthaus-Sein. In our first indication of the phenomenal character of Dyson's basic state, and in our clarification of the existential meaning of being in, as distinguished from the categorical significance of insideness, being in was defined as residing alongside, being familiar with. This character of being in was then brought to view more concretely through the everyday publicness of the they, which brings tranquilized obviousness into the average everydayness of Dyson. On the other hand, as Dyson falls, anxiety brings it back from its absorption in the world. Everyday familiarity collapses. Dyson has been individualized, but individualized as being in the world. Being in enters into the existential mode of the not at home. Nothing else is meant by our talk about uncanniness. Nevertheless, regardless of how extensive his analysis is here, Heidegger still fails to point out that unheimlich, when used as an adverb, means dreadfully, awfully, heaps of, and an awful lot of. Largeness has always been a condition of the weird and unsafe. It is overwhelming, too much or too big. Thus, that which is uncanny or unheimlich is neither homely, nor protective, nor comforting, nor familiar. It is alien, exposed and unsettling, or in other words, the perfect description of the house on Ash Tree Lane. In their absence, the Navidsons' home had become something else, and while not exactly sinister, or even threatening, the change still destroyed any sense of security or well-being. Upstairs in the master bedroom, we discover, along with Will and Karen, a plain white door with a glass knob. It does not, however, open into the children's room, but into a space resembling a walk-in closet. However, unlike other closets in the house, this one lacks outlets, sockets, switches, shelves, a rod on which to hang things, or even some decorative moulding. Instead, the walls are perfectly smooth and almost pure black, almost because there is a slightly grey quality to the surface. The space cannot be more than 5 feet wide and at most 4 feet long. On the opposite end, a second door, identical to the first one, opens up into the children's bedroom. Navidson immediately asks whether or not they overlooked the room. This seems ridiculous at first until one considers how the impact of such an implausible piece of reality could force anyone to question their own perceptions. Karen, however, manages to dig up some photos which clearly show a bedroom wall without a door. The next question is whether or not someone could have broken in and in 4 days constructed the peculiar addition. Improbable, to say the least. Their final thought is that someone came in and uncovered it, just installed 2 doors. But why? And for that matter, to quote Reich, who? Navidson does check the hi-8s, but discovers that the motion sensors were never triggered. Only their exit and re-entrance exists on the tape. Virtually a week seamlessly elided, showing us the family as they depart from a house without that strange interior space present, only to return a fraction of a second later to find it already in place, almost as if it had been there all along. Since the discovery occurred in the evening, the Navidsons' inquiry must wait until morning. And so, while Chad and Daisy sleep, we watch Karen and Will suffer through a restless night. Hillary, their 1-year-old Siberian Husky, and Mallory, their tabby cat, lie on either side of the 24-inch Sony television, unperturbed by the new closet, or the flicker from the tube, or the drone from the speakers. Letterman, new revelations regarding the Iran-Contra affair, reruns, the traffic of information assuring everyone that the rest of the world is still out there, continuing on as usual. Even if 2 new doors now stand open, providing a view across a new space of darkness, from parents' room to children's room, where a tiny nightlight of the Starship Enterprise burns like some North Star. It is a beautiful shot. In fact, the composition and elegant balance of colours, not to mention the lush contrast of lights and darks, are so exquisite they temporarily distract us from any questions concerning the house or events unfolding there. It seems a perfect example of Navidson's unparalleled talent and illustrates why few, if any, could have accomplished what he did, especially towards the end. The following day, both Karen and Will pursue the most rational course. They acquire the architectural blueprints from their local real estate office. As might have been expected, these blueprints are not actual building plans, but were drawn up in 1981 when former owners sought permission from the town's zoning board to construct an L. The L, however, was ultimately never built as the owners soon sold the property, claiming they needed something a little smaller. Though the designs as they appear on screen do not show a room or closet, they do confirm the existence of a strange crawl space, roughly 4 feet wide, running between both bedrooms. Alicia Rosenbaum, the real estate agent responsible for selling the Navidsons the house, gives the camera a bewildered shrug when Karen asks if she has any idea who could be responsible for this outrage. Unable to say anything useful, Mrs. Rosenbaum finally asks if they want to call the police, which amusingly enough they do. That afternoon, 2 officers arrive, examine the closet, and try to hide the fact that this has to be the weirdest call they have ever made. As Sheriff Axnard says, "We'll file a report, but other than that, well, I don't know what more we can do. Better, I guess, to have been a victim of a crazy carpenter than some robber," which even strikes Karen and Navidson as a little funny. With all obvious options exhausted, Navidson returns to the building plans. At first this seems pretty innocent, until he gets out a measuring tape. Idly at first, he starts comparing the dimensions indicated in the plans with those he personally takes. Very soon he realizes not everything adds up. Something, in fact, is very wrong. Navidson repeatedly tacks back and forth from his 25 Stanley power lock to the cold blue pages spread out on his bed, until he finally mutters aloud, "This better be a case of bad math." An incongruous cut presents us with the title card, 1/4. Outside the house, Navidson climbs up a ladder to the second story. Not an easy ascent, he casually confesses to us, explaining how a troublesome skin condition he has had since childhood has recently begun to flare up around his toes. Wincing slightly at what we can assume is at least moderate pain, he reaches the top rung, where, using a 100-foot Empire fiberglass tape with a hand crank, he proceeds to measure the distance from the far end of the master bedroom to the far end of the children's bedroom. The total comes to 32 feet, 9 inches and 3/4, which the house plans corroborate, plus or minus an inch. The puzzling part comes when Navidson measures the internal space. He carefully notes the length of the new area, the length of both bedrooms, and then factors in the width of the walls. The result is anything but comforting. In fact, it is impossible. 32 feet, 10 inches exactly. The width of the house inside would appear to exceed the width of the house as measured from the outside by 1/4 of an inch. Certain that he has miscalculated, Navidson drills through the outer wall to measure their width precisely. Finally, with Karen's help, he fastens the end of some fishing line to the edge of the outer wall, runs it through the drilled hole, stretches it across the master bedroom and the new space, the children's bedroom, and then runs it through the hole drilled through the opposite wall. He double-checks his work, makes sure the line is straight, level and taut, and then marks it. The measurement is still the same. 32 feet, 10 inches exactly. Using the same line, Navidson goes outside, stretches the fishing line from one side of the house to the other, only to find it is 1/4 of an inch too long. Exactly. The impossible is one thing when considered as a purely intellectual conceit. After all, it is not so large a problem when one can puzzle over an Escher print and then close the book. It is quite another thing when one faces a physical reality the mind and body cannot accept. Karen refuses the knowledge, a reluctant Eve who prefers tangerines to apples. "I don't care," she tells Navidson. "Stop drilling holes in my walls." Undeterred, Navidson continues his quest. Even though repeated attempts at measuring the house continue to reveal the 1/4-inch anomaly. Karen gets quieter and quieter. Navidson's mood darkens, and responding like finely tuned weather vanes, the children react to the change in parental weather by hiding in other parts of the house. Frustration edges into Navidson's voice. No matter how hard he tries, and Navidson tries 6 consecutive times in 6 consecutive segments, he cannot slaughter that tiny sliver of space. Another night passes, and that 1/4 of an inch still survives. When narratives in film and fiction often rely on virtually immediate reactions, reality is far more insistent and infinitely, literally, more patient. Just as insidious poisons in the water table can take years before their effects are felt, the consequences of the impossible are likewise not so instantly apparent.